and welcome, genties and ladlemen. It is in fact your boy drawfordeathmetal here, and today I'm going to be bringing you YuGiOh for Dummies. That's right, I'm going to be teaching you how to play this accursed card game. We'll be going through it step by step, how the cards work, how a turn works, the layout of the field, all that kind of stuff, as well as some stuff as how to get into the game, what stuff to buy, what stuff to avoid, all that kind of stuff. So let's begin, and we'll start off with the layout of the field here. Now I'd like to point out you don't need a big obnoxious map like this to play the game. You can get a cheap one just fine, but to start off with you have 5 main monster zones. This is where your monsters are going to go. They're going to be your first form of attack and defense. This is where your spells and trap cards go. You get 5 of them as well. This is where your extra deck goes, so this is where your fusion, synchro, Xyz, link monsters will go, as well as pendulum, but I don't personally play pendulums, but if you do play a pendulum deck, this is where they'll go when they are destroyed. This here is your field zone. This is where your field spell cards will go. We'll explain that in just a second. Over here is the graveyard. Once your spells and trap cards are used up, a monster is destroyed or sent to the graveyard in any way, this is where they will go. This up here is your extra monster zone, so any extra deck monsters you get, your fusions, your synchros, Xyz, links, they will get summoned there. Links have to be summoned here first before they can be summoned anywhere else. And then over here is where your banished cards will go. You can get mats that have these labelled on them, and if you are a beginner, this is what I definitely recommend to help you get used to the field. And here is your deck zone, which, again, self-explanatory, that's where you're going to put your main deck. So, in terms of the main deck, you can have up to 60 cards in it, but the minimum is 40. For consistency, most people tend to aim around the 40 to 43, 45 mark. But what goes in these decks? Well, what will go in these decks is one of the 3 main types of cards, which is monster, spell, and trap. See, I'm very professional, ladies and gentlemen, very professional, which we will go over in the next section. So, your monsters. Your monsters are going to be your first form of attack and defense, as well as a way to get certain things to happen in the game as well. So each monster card will look something like this here. In the case of the prayers of the voiceless voice, it will have its name, attribute, level, picture of the monster. In here, if the camera would like to not be wank, you have its type, whether it's an effect monster or not, as well as its card text here. The card text in a monster this color, which is an effect monster, will have what the card can do. So for example, in the case of voiceless voice, if you were to ritual summon exactly one light ritual monster, a warrior or a dragon with a card effect, and it negates one of your monsters, negates use of monster, this card can be used for the entire tribute. So that's something that the card can do. So in terms of how to get monsters out, you get what's called a normal summon per turn. Normal summon is just doing that. You place your monster on the field like that. Now if you look here, this wee star here denotes its level. Levels 1, 2, 3 and 4 can be normal summoned for free, like you don't need to do anything. If you were to have a higher level monster, such as a level 5 or a level 6 monster, in the case of a card like, probably a bad example, but Nibiru the Primal Being here, level 5 and 6, they need 1 tribute, so you would need to take your other monsters in the field, send it to the graveyard in order to summon it. Level 5 and 6 need 1, level 7 and above need 2, unless the card states otherwise. But everything about a card's summoning conditions its effect, whether on the field or in the graveyard or whatever, will be read on the card. YuGiOh is a lot of reading. I will say that now. It's a lot of fucking reading. But if you don't mind a bit of reading, this game can be pretty fun. So, that's your kind of normal-ish monsters out the way. You do get monsters called normal monsters where they don't have an effect, they are simply used for their statistics being their attack and their defense, which you can kind of see if the camera would like to focus anyway. In the case of Nibiru here, that is 3,000, that's its attack points there and its defense points there. That's what the kind of yellow vanilla monsters, as it were, for fuck's sake. That's what the vanilla monsters would be for. So they're your main forms of attack and defense. Those go in your normal, and effect monsters will go into your deck, as well as a ritual monster with this kind of blue card here. These monsters are a little bit outdated in the modern game, simply because they need 1 or 2 cards to tribute this card itself and what's usually called a ritual spell in order to summon. In order to ritual summon a monster, you need to tribute monsters from your hand or field that either equal or exceed the level of the monster you're trying to summon. So in this instance, this is a level 7, so you need to tribute monsters that make up to or more than level 7. So that's ritual monsters. Now in terms of other monsters, which you'll probably see a lot of people playing, they're more along the lines of things like fusion monsters, which have this kind of purple border here. These monsters require multiple monsters to make in most situations, which is usually found at the very top of their description. And these are usually made by a fusion spell, the most prominent of which being a card like Polymerization, which is iconic in the anime and the card game as well. And that's what you would use to... If I can just find Polymerization here, I do have a copy here somewhere. Yeah, there we are. So cards like these or any other fusion spell, which it will say in the name, these are what's used to bring out fusion monsters most of the time. And fusion monsters work just like any other monster. They'll have their fusion materials, as it's called, their effect as well, which again can be found in the card description as well. Again, it's a lot of reading, but overall it's pretty easy to wrap your head around, I feel, anyway. So that was the kind of thing for the longest time in the early stages of the game, and then somewhere around the kind of late 2000s to 2010s, you ended up with what was called a synchro monster, which is got this white border here, and it's similar in the way of like a ritual summon, except you need to be exact with the levels of the monsters that are attributed, as well as one of those monsters needs to be what's called a tuner monster. How do you know what one's a tuner monster? You will find it in its description. So in the case of my little Durac ALO here, you can kind of see, again this camera's not the best, but right there it will say tuner. Tuners are usually low level, usually 1 to 3, maybe 4, sometimes above. So them and one other monster that matches the level of the synchro monster, which in the case of Durac Astro here is a level 10. So you would need to take a little fella like him and enough monsters to get to that level. Sorry, I'm very bad at explaining stuff, but I'm trying anyway. So that's your synchro monsters, and for the longest time they were kind of dominant in the meta until we had another form of monster called an Xyz monster. It's spelled XYZ, but it's pronounced Xyz, Xyz, one of those two. These have the black border, and you can see that their stars are on the opposite side of the card, because once you get an Xyz monster, it's no longer called a level, it's called a rank. So in the case of Ryzeal Detonator here, it's rank 4. So its rank usually denotes what level monsters you need to XC summon it, which in the case of this one here, it's 2 level 4 YuGiOh monsters, which is a specific archetype, but a lot of them generally just require the specific level of monsters. And how to exceed summon is you would take your 2 monsters, your 2 level 4 monsters, which I know this isn't proper for YuGiOh Detonator specifically, but you would take your 2 level 4 monsters, you would overlay them on top of each other, and then put the Xyz monster on top of that. Those become what's called Xyz materials attached to your Xyz monster. A lot of Xyz monsters effects, usually come from detaching a material, which means just taking it out and sending it to the graveyard. That's what's called detaching an Xyz material. And lastly, at least for the ones that I play anyway, you have what's called a link monster, such as Dynamondo here, which again you can kind of see in its at the very top it will have its summoning requirements, which in this case is 2 monsters including a ritual monster. And as you can see there, that corresponds to its link rating number 2. You can get up to, I've seen link 5, but you'll learn more of that kind of stuff as you play. Again, this is just kind of trying to simplify kind of what all these things mean. And to get your link monsters, you would simply send monsters that meet the requirements from the field to the graveyard, and then you would put that in your extra monster zone here. After you've summoned there, you can put any other link monsters or ones you're bringing back from the graveyard or whatever into these here, into your main monster zones, but usually links are meant to be here in any case. So now you know your monsters, your kind of main form of attack and defense. What else do you use in the game? It's not purely just monsters. You also have what's called spell cards. Spell cards, for example, they are them here. You can either activate them like that, or you can set them and wait. But these kinds of spell cards you can only use, what's called a normal spell card, you can only use on your turn, or on your opponent's turn if it's set. So in the case of one such as Harpy's Feather Duster, you can see it just says spell card there, and its effect is destroy all spell and traps your opponent controls. So that's your normal spell card there. You do get multiple types of spell cards. You get your normal spell cards, your continuous spell cards, quick play spell cards, ritual spell cards, and field spell cards. An example of a quick play spell will have, it's kind of hard to make out, but you can see that little kind of lightning bolt icon there. That's a quick play spell. So if it's on your field or in your hand, if your opponent does something, you can activate a quick play spell card, so long as its requirements are met, which you will find in the card description. That will have everything you need for its activation requirement, what it does, if it's got a cost to it, so you have to do something to get this effect, all that kind of stuff. That's your quick play spell card. Or you might have what's called a continuous spell card, which has a little infinity icon here. Kind of see it, but it's a kind of infinity icon. So once you've placed it in the field, it stays there until it's destroyed or it meets a certain requirement. For example, usually after X amount of turns, but usually when it's destroyed. So once it's on the field, it stays in the field until it's done, really. And then you have the field spell, which has a little compass icon, which you can see in the case of Jirak Volcano there. Field spell cards are different because they have their own designated zone, which is the field zone right there. They go there, and for the longest time it was only one person could have a field spell. However, a few years ago they made the change in the master rules so that everybody, both players, can have their own field spell. So that's fine. Field spells usually, back in the early days, they usually just gave buffs to certain types or attributes of monsters, but now they do a lot more and they add a lot more utility to the field and can add some nice recursion or whatever effects, all that kind of stuff. So Field spells can be just as important as regular spells, context depending of course. It all depends on the deck you're playing. Some decks rely heavily on field spells, some don't really rely on field spells. It just depends. But in any case, as well as spells, you have what's called traps. Traps are different from the other cards that we've mentioned in that you need to set them before you use them, and you need to wait a turn in order to use them. And just like spell cards, there are different types of trap cards. There aren't as many types of trap cards. There is only your normal trap cards, your continuous trap cards, and your counter trap cards. So again, the continuous trap cards will have that same continuous icon that the continuous spell does, but counter trap cards will have a little kind of arrow like that pointing that way. Counter trap cards are kind of the know you kind of card, and effectively once a counter trap card's been activated, the effects chain will usually just end there. You can't really respond to counter trap cards unless you've got another counter trap card. But in any case, that's the different kind of cards you have. So what do you actually do with them? Let's go over that in the next section. So now that we've kind of roughly went over what the different cards do, up next is how does a turn carry out? So, one game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just simply called a duel, and then usually a match is best of 3. You do get best of 5, best of 7, but normally it's best of 3. So to start each duel, people shake hands, because you know, sportsmanship and stuff, and then either you do rock, paper, scissors, or a dice roll, or a coin toss to decide who goes first. Going first in Yu-Gi-Oh! Gives a lot of advantages, because you can set up your field, you can prep yourself what your opponent might do next, but at the same time, you cannot draw for your first turn, nor can you attack in the first turn. So that's the downside of that. However, if you're going second, while you can draw, you do have what might be a full board to deal with. You need to figure out how to navigate said board and get rid of any obstacles that are in the way. The way to win Yu-Gi-Oh! Is each player has 8,000 life points, and the goal is to either get those life points down to 0 or get to the point where your opponent decks out and they just run out of cards in their deck zone. That's the main way. It's mainly the life point thing to win, but there's also the case of your opponent might deck out, which depending on the deck they're playing, there is a possibility that could happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you how a normal turn would go, for example. Well, obviously this isn't going to be exactly how a turn would go, because again, this is just kind of for demonstration. A lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Turns, especially in the more advanced formats, can be very quick and a lot of stuff can happen, but yeah. So your turns are split into your draw phase, standby phase, main phase 1, battle phase, main phase 2, end phase, and then the turn ends. So to start off with, each player will have 5 cards in their hand, like so. Each player starts off with 5 cards in their hand before the game starts. And first player will go, they will normal summon their monster, they will usually set some spells, set some traps, that kind of thing. And depending on what their effects do, a lot of players will usually do stuff that adds like cards from their deck to their hand, or send stuff from deck to graveyard, or whatever it might be. But generally that's how the first turn will go. Then comes the next turn, and then comes the draw phase, where you draw 1 card from the top of your deck. You do that every turn. Your standby phase kicks in. Standby phase is mainly for effects that happen during the standby phase, which will be denoted on the cards themselves. For example, in the case of the Fire King cards, a lot of, for example, Fire King Ponyx, its effect reads that during the standby phase, this card was destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you add it back to your hand. So it's mainly timing. That's when standby phase kicks in. Main phase 1 is when you get to do your normal summons, your special summons mainly, Your special summons being your fusioning, your synchros, your Xyz, your linking, as well as you can special summon stuff from the hand and graveyard if you meet the requirements for it. So for example, and your deck as well. So for example, in the case of like Blaster, Dragon Ruler, Sparks here, I could discard this card and a dragon type or a fire monster, and I can special summon a specific monster from my deck, but it can't attack. So a lot of cards will have an effect, but that effect usually comes with a downside, usually being you can't attack or you are locked into only summoning certain types of monsters for the rest of the turn. Which in the very beginning, turns were usually pretty quickly, because it was mainly just summon, set, pass. That's it. But these days, turns can last ages, especially if a player is popping off and doing lots of card combos, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's generally how a turn will go. That's your main phase 1. Up next is your battle phase. That's when your monsters will attack each other or attack your opponent directly. You can only attack your opponent directly if there are no monsters on their side of the field, and in which case then there's a little bit of math. So if you're attacking an opponent's monster and it's in attack position, so facing that way like this, you take your monster's attack points and your opponent's monster's attack points, and whichever's highest wins, and then the difference between them is dealt to your opponent's life points. If your opponent's monster is higher attack than yours, then your monster gets destroyed and you take the damage. If they're both the same, then both monsters are destroyed and no damage is dealt. If a monster is either in set like this or face up like this and sideways, that means they're in their defense position. So the same rules apply, but you would use the defense stats. If your attack is higher than their defense, that monster is destroyed, but that monster is in defense position, they take no damage. Whereas if their defense is higher, your monster doesn't get destroyed, but you still take the damage. And if they're the same, then nothing happens. They both just stay there. However, some monsters have an effect where they do piercing battle damage. And what piercing is that damage is dealt regardless of whether or not it's defense. But the same math still applies. It's the difference between the two values, their attack and their defense points. So that's where battle phase kicks in. Some effects do happen in the battle phase, but again, that's kind of noted in the cards. I know I keep saying noted in the cards a lot, but generally the cards will explain what they do, when they're to be activated, all that kind of stuff. After the battle phase comes your main phase 2. If you haven't done your normal summon for the turn yet, you can do it in your main phase 2. As well as you can activate spells, activate traps if you've set them the previous turn, that kind of thing. Then your end phase, there are some effects that happen in end phase. So for example, Bestial Magnum at the end phase will get you to add a Bestial card from your deck to your hand. Just one example, and then your turn ends, and then that cycle repeats until again either somebody reaches 0 life points, or until somebody decks out, or they just surrender. So that's in general the way a turn goes. Now that you have a deck in mind, something else to get when you are getting into this game is some accessories. Those being sleeves, a deck mat, not a deck mat, a play mat, and a deck box. There are different ends to the spectrum. You do get some really cheap accessories, you do get some more expensive ones. Me personally, depending on what it is, I kind of sit in the middle. For deck boxes, I usually tend to go the very cheap route, such as these Ultra Pro boxes here. Really good quality for their price point, about £2 to £3 a piece. Come in loads of different colours, and just write whatever deck is in there. For example, this one's for my 10-pie Dragon Ruler deck, which the deck profile should be up by now. If it's not already, it will be up soon, but I do believe it's up right now. So you do get them, and that's what I use for deck boxes. You do get some really expensive, really fancy ones that have different compartments for dice and tokens and all that kind of stuff, but me personally, keep it simple. I follow the old KISS rule. In terms of mats, one company that I really swear by is a company called LDB Duo, which you'll see on the screen right there. This is where I got my amazing drawfordeathmetal custom mat here. Logo done by Gorecrush Studios. Check them out for any artwork needs. As you can see, it's really thick. This is about 3mm thick. It's got stitched edges. Really good quality stuff. I swear by it. They're really, really good. God damn it, the lights have went out. I like to keep these bloopers in because it's funny. I like to keep them in just because it's funny. But yeah, you don't need a very expensive playmat. That's just what I like. You do get cheap ones for, you know, about 20 or so pounds. Get rubber ones just because they're a lot more durable and can take a lot more action as opposed to the little paper ones that you get with the structure decks that I mentioned earlier in the video. They are fine for just starting out, but ideally you want to get a rubber one. In terms of rubber ones, you can get them at any like game store, any card shop, Amazon as well, or websites like LDB Duels here. These ones have so many really cool designs. Like, not gonna lie, I kinda want that Toon one because I love the Toon deck. Got ones for Mulch Armies, got ones for Alubur, the Jester of Despia, Fallen of Albaz, Yummy, Tri-Brigade, Dark Magician, Blue Eyes, even got some Pokemon ones there. There's a Gundam one. Really good for any kind of nerdy playmats. I highly rate them. As for sleeves, Ultra Pro do have their own sleeves that I think are about £3-4 a box. I don't remember exactly, they're maybe £5 now because, you know, gotta love the government. But a company that I swear by when it comes to sleeves is Dragon Shield. You can get them in loads of different funky colours, like for example this one here. I have them in white. These ones are the matte white, so they've got a nice, really good feeling back, which, you know, phrasing. But that's the Dragon Shield ones there, really good quality, really nice hand feel, which I know just sounds fucking weird, but you get my point. Get them in loads of different colours as well, like you can see there's purple, there's black. I really like the black ones look sick. You can get them in all these cool like brushed art ones as well. I don't like the feel of them so much in my hands, but they do look really cool. Get them in gold, white like you've seen there, midnight blue, green, red, pink, silver. These are definitely a bit more expensive than your kind of really cheap brand sleeves. They're about £7-8 a box, but I definitely swear by them. They feel really good in the hand, they feel really easy to shuffle, your cards feel protected. I highly rate them. But just make sure that when you are getting sleeves, you get Japanese size specifically, which it will say on the box. Because if you get the standard size sleeves, they're mainly for things like Pokemon, Magic the Gathering. I think One Piece also uses standard size sleeves as well. But make sure you get Japanese size sleeves for YuGiOh, mainly because it will warp the cards, it will damage them, and it just looks kind of stupid if you're rocking up with massive sleeves. But yeah, they're the sleeves that I swear by. And then when it comes to playing other decks or maybe finding new cards to make the decks these structure decks better, like I'd mentioned earlier, to start off with the structure decks, when it comes to getting single cards or any kind of product, if your local game store doesn't have them, I highly recommend this site, Unicorn Cards. They have nearly everything you could possibly need for pretty much every card game. Like, see, they've got the new Chronicles deck there, as well as the singles from it as well. Like, there's Triple Tactics Thrust and Black Gold Laughs and all that. So if you need any kind of TCG singles, then I highly rate Unicorn Cards for singles. You can also get sealed product like booster boxes. Booster boxes aren't the way to go if you are looking just to complete your deck. It's best just to wait for the singles because obviously booster boxes are random. So you might not get the cards that you want, and you'll get cards for completely different strategies that you can't really use with any of the decks that you might have. But if you do just like the feeling of open booster boxes, you can get them on Unicorn Cards as well. Another website that I highly rate is Tier 0 Games. Again, they've got good prices. They sell singles, they sell sealed products, so all your booster boxes and stuff like that. But one thing I like about Tier 0 Games is that they sell what's called deck cores. What a deck core is it's the key components of a specific strategy that then has everything in one package, which will be a little bit more expensive, but I find it's the best way to get the cards you need for a specific strategy. So for example, you've got ones like Fiendsmith, or you've got the Exodia Millennium cards, Mimigo, Voiceless Voice, Tenpai, Goblin Bikers, but these do tend to sell out pretty quickly. So if you are going to go this route, make sure you get them mucho fasto, because they will sell out. And I can see why, because it's everything in one bundle for a decent price. Highly rate Tier 0 Games as well. Quick shipping. Often free shipping if you spend above a certain amount. Same with unicorn cards. But yeah, that's what I recommend getting. Any single cards, booster boxes, deck cores. You can get sleeves on unicorn cards as well. They do have some Dragon Shield stuff, but they do sell it pretty quickly as well. I usually recommend getting Dragon Shield stuff either directly from them or from like a game store, for example. Most card shops will have some kind of Dragon Shield sleeves. But again, and I cannot emphasize this enough, make sure you get Japanese size sleeves, because otherwise your cards won't fit and it might end up damaging them. Get Japanese size sleeves and you're grand. Yeah, if you've made it this far in the video, this is probably near a 40-minute video. I appreciate you so much for watching. If you like what you hear, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of shit. And hopefully this video has at least been somewhat helpful. I know I'm not the best at explaining it, but the best way I think to just kind of learn this game is to pick up three of the three structure decks that I mentioned. And then once you've learned how to kind of play that, again, everything's kind of self-explanatory in the cards and stuff like that. But the best way is to get those three structure decks, get some cheap accessories, and you're good to go. If you want to skip the real life route, you can play the game digitally on apps like YuGiOh Master Duel or Duel Links or Rush Duel. But if you want a digital experience that's as true to the card game as possible, I recommend Master Duel. The only thing with Master Duel is that it's not the easiest way to get the cards that you want. A lot of them might, and it's one of those games where it's like free to play, like it is a free game, but obviously there's microtransactions in order to get the cards that you actually want. So just bear that in mind if you do decide to go that route, but it has a complete tutorial on every mechanic in the game. I highly recommend it if you're just kind of learning to start out, or if you don't have anybody to play the game in real life with. You don't even need to leave your house. You can get it on any console, you can get it on your phone, you can get it on your tablet. And again, it's completely free. It does have a slightly different Forbidden and Limited list, which is groups of cards that Konami, the makers of the game, have decided are too powerful to be just kind of let loose. So it does have a slightly different Forbidden and Limited list. I will leave a link to where you can find the Forbidden and Limited list as well for the trading card game. Let's just get rid of that. That does update every few months. I wish it was more consistent, but if you are planning on playing competitively, or you just want to abide by like tourney rules when building your deck, definitely make sure you keep tabs on the Forbidden and Limited list, because it changes. Some cards get brought off the list, meaning you can play up to 3 of them. Only 3 of any card can be used in your deck. Some can be you're only allowed 2, some you're only allowed 1, and then some you're just straight up not allowed whatsoever. But that does change. I will have the link in the description there. But yeah, again, thank you very much for making it to this part. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully it was at least somewhat helpful. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but I appreciate it either way. Peace and love. Mwah.